The year is 1989, and we follow two New York City police detectives, Nick Conklin, played by Michael Douglas, and Charlie Vincent, played by Andy Garcia, who arrest a member of the Japanese Yakuza. While escorting the criminal back to Osaka, they are tricked into handing him over to a gang member disguised as a police officer. Determined to correct their mistake, the detectives work alongside Japanese Inspector Masahiro Matsumoto to recapture the fugitive and dismantle the powerful crime syndicate led by the ruthless Sato. As they navigate cultural differences, corruption, and violent confrontations, Nick learns to respect Japanese customs and policing methods. This film combines action, suspense, and themes of honor and justice, but is that enough to place it on the high end of Ridley Scott's filmography? We'll find out, because this week on Back to the Balcony, we discuss 1989's Black Rain. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. You know, man, I've been so, what's the best way to put it? Disappointed and vocally disappointed about Ridley Scott's filmography from, like, let's say 2008 forward. I think the man just makes too many movies because he's got something to prove, and they're usually big epics and big spectacles, and they always look nice, but that doesn't mean that they're great movies. And sometimes I just wish, like, it's better to burn out than fade away is the motif. Like, he doesn't need to keep making movies. The man's almost 90 and he's still making movies. However, there was this era where I felt that Ridley Scott could do no wrong, and even like his weakest entries had a lot of redeeming values to them, and this is one of those movies. Someone to Watch Over Me is another one, kind of similar in tone. You know, it's like a dark detective romance protection movie. Not a lot of spectacle, but a lot of atmosphere. But this one does it, but it takes it overseas, to Osaka, to the Japanese culture, to the neon lights, the cities, the smog. And that's what really makes this movie look great. But how does it play story-wise? How are these characters? How is the flow of the film? Is it good? Is it enthralling? Is it absorbing? After this last watch of a DVD that I've had since like the late 90s, no, it's not. It's got a lot of rough edges to it. But like so many other Ridley Scott movies, I forgive a lot of those rough edges because it is so atmospheric and fascinating to look at. And you know me, I forgive a lot of movies if you bring me into the world and get me submersed in that atmosphere. So I do give it the slightest of passes for that. The performances are good. The atmosphere is great. The set design is great. The score, the action. But man, this is like such A to B storyline that it just really suffers at the bone structure of the movie, right? The flesh is great. The bones kind of suck.
This is one that I 100% agree is I haven't seen this movie in probably about a decade. And after the rewatch, there's no argument that this movie looks fantastic, but I've almost been on a kick lately where I've seen this problem come up in more current films where we try and make the direction compensate for performance. And we see that more in the back half of the movie where things look fantastic. There's no debate on me on that. This movie is brilliant when it comes to the visuals, the set design, et cetera, et cetera. But it tries so hard to make these characters interesting in the direction, the setting to amplify these performances that there's really no substance to these performances, especially when it comes to the back half of the movie. Now, when it comes to the first half of the movie, this is my problem with it is so close to Blade Runner. Instead of technology, we have culture here that is really trying to debate itself. And the Andy Garcia character, I wanted more of. This one this one, he was killed off way too soon without building upon the chemistry. And I think this is a movie that really has problem with chemistry because by the time we get Garcia, we feel we're getting to an arc between these two cops, and then he's just killed off. And then we go into an investigator and a cop that are so stiff, and they have heroes with flaws, but we don't really get anything from both of them. We just get a singular conversational piece that's uninteresting, that doesn't feel a resolve until we get to the climax with a mere thumbs up. So I think this movie is really segmented when it comes to a lot in the beginning, not so much at the end. We get pumped full of visuals towards the back half of the movie to compensate for story and performances. And I think this movie, again, missed opportunity, especially with the success of Blade Runner. This could have been something special.
No, I agree with you. The problem is with the characters. And here's the thing. We've seen Michael Douglas play this character multiple times. And the Andy Garcia character is a great character side piece to that, the dynamic. And the idea is that Matsumoto is supposed to kind of replace that dynamic once Andy Garcia's character is taken out at the midpoint. But he doesn't because the idea that they have to really stress that the Japanese culture is based on structure and honor and discipline, we already know that. Like, I don't know anyone who doesn't already understand that. We don't have to paint by numbers by making these characters stiff as a board and, trying to cover up the corruption because it's a dishonor to them that corruption exists. And they hold Michael Douglas's corruption against him from the States and what he's done on that side. That doesn't really matter if you don't have conflicting chemistries. And that's the problem is once you take the most colorful person out of the movie, it just stops. Like the action and the emotion and the drama, it just stops. That moment where he exits the movie, it just becomes all about visuals at that point. And that can be okay if that's what you go for. But when you have to have that much movie left and you don't have anything to build it on, that is the problem. I almost feel like Michael Douglas should have been killed in the halfway point, and then Andy Garcia solves the rest of the case with Matsumoto and teaches him how to sing more karaoke. I love that. But you know what? That is a very common trope of this era. This buddy cop idea where you have to differentiate yourself enough from the other buddy cop movies, and sometimes it works, and then sometimes it doesn't. And this is a sense where it doesn't, where you've got two buddy cop stories going on. Neither of them are very interesting because the story isn't interesting. In fact, I mean, maybe that is the genius of this movie is that Americans are just fucking stupid because Michael Douglas is kind of just stupid throughout this whole movie. He goes with his gut and his gut does lead him to like some right answers. But if he didn't have Kate Capshaw helping him out in the bar, if he didn't have Matsumoto, if he didn't have any of the Japanese honor and structure, then he really is just a disservice to everyone in the movie. If that was the point of the film, well, then make his character more idiotic and lame. Stop trying to hero worship him when there's really nothing redeemable about that character at all.
I just had this problem with Exit to Eden where we have a higher stake conflict here. And this is where I think the movie really does get it wrong is where does Michael Douglas have jurisdiction? Why does everybody seem they can, just because they have a badge, they can go enforce the law anywhere? This one could have had some stake in it if we focused on what Michael Douglas can and can't do, what his limitations were. He is more of a private investigator here than our private investigator. So why not have a focus on the character and have him be more taking charge? And in the second half of the movie, have Michael Douglas follow that lead, learning the culture, learning what the procedures are. I think that would have been a lot more interesting. And this is, again, goes back to kind of just sloppy writing. And when it comes to Bulletin and Lewis, who are newcomers at this point, I think the writers, Bolton had one Miami Vice and the other one 13th Warrior, the most notable credits. And I think that is the problem here is that when you get excited on writing, it is common that you put all your ideas in the first half of the movie because you're just vomiting all these ideas that just come to mind. In the back half of the movie takes a second seat. It's like watching a Broadway show to an extent. The first half of the show is usually the best part, and then the second half just kind of drags. We kind of see that here is all the good ideas are vomited in the first half and it has nowhere to go. This one needed more. It just God, I can't count the times my eyes got heavy in the second half. And if it wasn't for the visuals, I would have pressed stop.
So this is where I'm gonna like say some shit that might piss off like real Ridley Scott fans, which I am one at heart up to a certain point in time. Is that like I really don't think, based off his track record, that Ridley Scott is a stickler for story or for plot structure. He is a visual artist. You know, he was a commercial director and he knows how to make things look good. If it's a good script already, well, he's just going to make that script better with all those visuals and the way he builds spectacle. However, I don't think he has the chops as a storyteller to use his talents as a visual artist to fix a broken script. And we've seen that in multiple films. Like another film that I feel I'm on the fence on is Kingdom of Heaven. It is a masterpiece of visual work and visual art, and just the scope of it is amazing. But the story is dog shit. The dialogue is dog shit. That's the difference. Like, that's where I feel like if he knew it was dog shit, he would do something to fix the dog shit. Instead, he paints over it. His Alien films are the same way. And then, I don't know, there are some films like Body of Lies, which almost get away with it, but then don't. So this is the Ridley Scott conundrum is, can you forgive a filmmaker who is such a visual genius, a visual storytelling, for not being so concerned about the story or the plot structure that the visuals are going to overcompensate? And we can see this in movies that have good scripts and they work, but if they don't, it really is polishing a turd. This isn't quite turd, but it's not far off because there is a lot of good in this movie. But you're right. That plot structure and the pacing of that second half is rough. It's a rough go from an hour and 15 on. It's a rough go, as pretty as it is.
Well, when we get to that steel mill, whatever it is, whatever factory they're in, with a lot of the red highlights, the sparks, the visuals, that goes on for literally 15, 20 minutes of nothingness. And it's just like staring at a painting. It looks good, but nothing happens. This movie could have literally been 20 to 30 minutes less, and it still would have been just as effective, if not better, honestly, because it would have really taken this character at a more action level to say, I'm going to follow this character versus just watching what Ridley is painting a picture on screen. And I think the prime example to what you said would be White Squall with Ridley, where that is a completely
Right.
forgettable movie, but it is done brilliantly when it comes to what we're seeing on screen. But holistically, you can't polish shit. And this is one that you can tell he's really elongating that runtime to paint a picture of entertainment instead of substance. And that is where it really breaks down and it loses the audience. I guarantee you, people that watch this film won't have a huge argument against the first half until Andy Garcia dies, but they will lose in the second half because nothing comes from it. We have to literally
Nothing
go
happens.
45, 50 minutes, I think is the last time I looked at my clock during the rewatch, and I had to sit through nothingness. It is aggravating.
And we haven't had chemistry built between Matsumoto and Nick throughout the movie. The chemistry was between Charlie and Matsumoto. So we don't have that investment between these two. As they're kind of butting heads with each other about procedure and policy, well, that's just dialogue, right? It's just exposition. It's got nothing to do with the build of the story. And here's another thing that I think might be a problem with it is this is 1989 and we are still in that like hyper testosterone era where our heroes have to be heroes. What Nick Conklin needed was a serious fucking wake up call at some point in the movie that would crush him and destroy him. He is not broken up enough by Charlie. That should have completely flattened him, and then it would have added some depth to the character of the rest of the movie that we could have gotten on board with. Other movies have done that perfectly when it comes to a cop partner situation. I'm going to say Joe Carnahan's Narc is a perfect example of how you can play that overly aggressive yet insecure and fragile cop with Ray Liotta's character. And then I think that they do it again in Insomnia, the Christopher Nolan remake, actually both versions, where that main character is a tough, aggressive cop who makes a mistake and it crushes him. The guilt and the emotion is what we connect with him throughout the rest of the movie. But Michael Douglas doesn't even change a face in the rest of the film. He just has that grimace all the way through, and it makes us grimace because we're not allowed to grow or sync with this character because the machismo of it says, no, he has to be stoic. Nothing is more boring than a fucking stoic hero, in my opinion.
Well, he doesn't have any arc in this movie other than a conversation of him admitting guilt towards the last 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it may be of the movie.
Right. I'm going to go home to New York and get fired and I'll have to figure something else. No, how about you go home to New York and you're going to get killed? Like, raise the stakes or something.
But he doesn't change. This is supposed to be like an 80s cop buddy movie. There's nothing supporting it. There's no dialogue supporting it. There's no story to support it. Where is this character supposed to go? And that is where, again, we've talked about before, we need to have a pivot in storytelling. When you know as a director, in respect to Scott, that you have to rely on visuals, but you know your character is going nowhere, you're spending all this time telling this story, creating these scenes. You have to know a way to pivot, to make this character feel relevant, to feel important, to feel like this movie is going to end with an exclamation mark. And here's the ending result. We get a final shot of a thumbs up. That means nothing.
They talk about it in the critique. We'll talk a little bit right now. You know, there is something to be said. I think maybe at the time, 1989, it's a different world. There was a xenophobia going on about the Japanese taking over everything, business-wise. You know, industry, Gung Ho, a movie about them buying car plants. It becomes a running joke in the Lethal Weapon movies. And it's a running joke that eventually becomes a movie itself in the film Rising Sun, which I think does a better job at showing the juxtapositions of the cultures because you've got a guide. And Sean Connery is that guide. He is that American character that has been immersed in Japanese culture, and he can guide us through what the differences are. In this, I feel like it is total stereotype, things that we kind of already expect, and more of like a slideshow of what Japanese business and crime organizations look like in the city of Osaka. And Michael Douglas being the fish out of water, well, if he's such a tough New York cop, there is no city more diverse than New York City. And he acts like he's fresh off the farm in Japan. And it doesn't make sense to me, and I don't like it. I don't like the fact that he's so fucking dumb that he doesn't understand the a modicum of culture when he comes from a very diverse city. It's like, oh no, New York's just full of white people like me. It doesn't work, right? Because we're not given a guide. Matsumoto isn't his guide. He's more of like his principal, right? He doesn't teach him. He just tells him no. Like, that's not how it works here. Well, fucking guide him, but they don't want to because no one wants him there. Right? So that's the problem. I feel like the writers thought they had a good conflict building with him being there and no one wanting him there. But all it really does is show us how flawed that character is. And then it gives us no reason to get behind him for the rest of that movie.
I think you're giving the movie, you're overanalyzing it. Let's look at this.
Right?
You go to a different country.
We never do that on this show.
Never. Whenever you go to a country, is your first instinct to wave a gun chasing a motorcycle down the street in a foreign land where nobody knows who you are? That's fucking stupid. It's stupid writing. This is where the movie really does not do its research is there is an opportunity for cultural differences here or even common sense. Michael Douglas's character has no common sense. They try and do the
No.
cowboy thing, but that's not even sustained because there's no examples of why he deserves to be a cowboy in Japan. There's no examples other than he's just an outcast. He's just a hero that's damaged, whatever it may be. There are so many mistakes here that he makes, but he feels entitled, or I should say, the writers make him entitled that he can do whatever he wants. And that doesn't work here.
Right.
We have
Right.
question marks on why he does the things he does, and it's never answered. And that, again, goes to our amateur writers here that give us nothing of curiosity of, like we got in Blade Runner, technology versus a man that isn't comfortable with it, whatever it may be. Here we have a man that should be uncomfortable in another foreign country, but we don't feel that.
Right. It's not quite white savior trope, but it's not far off, you know? Like there is this idea where we feel at some point these two American cops are going to make all of the Japanese cops just have more fun with their job, right? Like you guys need to loosen up. You're too about rules and policy. That's not how you have a good time. Well, you shouldn't have a good time. Take your job seriously. And Andy Garcia is kind of like the voice of reason of that. You know, he's kind of like the good angel on Nick's shoulder. What this is written like, this is written like Cobra. This is written for a Stallone-like character that doesn't give a shit, that just blows shit up, right? But that's the contradiction of this movie, is that I feel like maybe it was written to be that way. I feel like maybe that was the intent. But Ridley Scott is such a purist of respect of the surrounding and of the setting and of the, I'm not going to say respect of the culture, but you got to make it look real. You got to make it look good. And they did shoot a lot on location, and then they shot a lot in the States that they made look like the location. And he was really adamant that it matched. And I think that's the problem, is that does Ridley Scott not necessarily understand nuance? He just looks at this script, looks at the story, and it's like, okay, well, it's Osaka. Without even looking at the words on the page, he's like, we need flashing dragon neon lights. We need the pachinko parlors. We need like this really cool street swept landscape. We need this dark underground for the motorcycle fight. That's where his mind is going, and it completely misses the nuance of this character. Because I feel like maybe there is the intent of making that Nick character a lot more flawed, but that doesn't fit the vision of Ridley Scott's idea of what this world looks like. And I think that's why there is this weird contradiction between character and surrounding.
I think this was a cleanse for him to say, or a realization for him, where he goes on to do Thelma and Louise and G.I. Jane, saying, I need to focus more on my characters,
Yep.
from there. And we saw that because after he went to Gladiator and then Hannibal, which is another character driven film. So I think it was a smart move for him to see flaws in taking on a project that the characters go nowhere, because we slowly see him get a little bit better with his character development of storytelling for a number of years versus supplementing it with visuals. And I think that was a smart move for him. But I think this one was the crossing point for him to say, I can't tell a story with just visuals, or else it's just going to be a fireworks show without audio. And I think this is a brilliant movie for him to realize that in his career, that he had the confidence after Blade Runner to tell something almost close to Blade Runner without smart writing.
Right. Like this is the perfect example of where the trailer is better than the movie, because you can truncate all of that stuff that is elongated in the film, but still show off all the visual flair. The trailer for this is awesome, you know? And this is before the days of CG. It's all practical sets. It's all practical environments, and it works. The smoke, you know, you're watching a Ridley Scott movie when you walk into a room, and I'm talking about the nightclub where Kate Copshaw works, and there's the biggest fucking ceiling fan you've ever seen in your life that's spotlit from like 5 different directions, and there's smoke in the room. That's a Ridley Scott movie, right? What does that have to do with anything? Nothing. But you're glad it's there. And you're glad you're watching it like in 35 millimeter 235 anamorphic, right? Because it just looks great. That's what he's there to do. He's not there to make us understand, like, our critics will say, how is Kate Capshaw, a white country girl from the Midwest, there for 8 years, yet totally immersed in the Japanese underworld? I don't know, but it's in there.
There is
anyway.
There is a shot in this movie that it's a Ridley Scott movie, and you're trying to stall. Is when we have a hillside that kind of has hills that go up and down. It's misty. You have the moonlight in the back. You have a 10-second pause, but as a viewer, you're going to see something interesting and beautiful. And you see that car come over the hill through the mist. And that is what this movie is just waiting to see something, waiting for it to be shown something, not to be impacted, not to have an experience, not to be told a story, but just to be visually pleased by it. And I think that's what defines this movie.
All right, well, so now we know how we feel about it. Let's hear what our critics have to say. Gene brought this to the show.
First film is the highly touted Black Rain by Ridley Scott, the maker of Alien and Blade Runner. Like those pictures, Black Rain is good looking, but there's not much else to recommend it. Michael Douglas plays a tough New York City detective. How tough? He drag races a punk on a motorcycle as the movie begins. The rest of the film is about as sophisticated. The next thing that happens is that Douglas and his partner witness a Japanese mobster threaten a rival doing business with an American mafioso. Black Rain has a good villain, but I think the script makes a fundamental mistake. The Michael Douglas character is presented as very much in control. Most of the time he's in Japan, and I think the whole picture would have been so much better if he had been totally at sea, constantly being fooled along with us in the audience. Why should he understand how? He's a run-of-the-mill New York detective. He's not the big all-star, okay? Why would he know how detective work is done in Japan? How would he know how Japanese criminals work, especially on their own turf? It doesn't make any sense. Instead, he is played as the traditional macho hero, and that kind of cultural imperialism, I think, really undoes the movie.
I mean, he essentially said the same thing I did with a little bit more elocution, but his cultural imperialism line, I think, is perfect because it goes to my whole white savior argument, right? He's allowed to be this way because he's the white dude in Japan. That's what it is. That character is written dumb as rocks, but he's not played that way. Yet the message that we get from the movie is he's allowed to do so much of this because he is the white guy. That's just what it is. And again, I don't know if that is a studio note saying, hey, you can't make the white guy dumb. He's the hero. It's Michael Douglas. Make him like tough and make him the cowboy. Make him the Clint Eastwood in Japan. But that's not what the movie is, in my opinion. It shouldn't be that way. He is the one that has to be led by the hand by this establishment of honor and structure and discipline so he can become not only a better cop, but a better person. And there is undertones of that in the movie, but they just get walked right over. And I think that Gene nailed it 100%, that it causes this disillusion of what the movie is. Nothing makes sense because the character is wrong. It's played wrong or it's written wrong. Something's wrong.
I'm going to go back to what you said prior because I think it's notable is this movie was meant for a different director. Like this was supposed to be a Cobra because how many 80 cop movies did we have where cops ended up in different states, different cities, different countries, and they all have jurisdiction. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter. This is supposed to be for an audience that doesn't care. But Ridley really wants people to care. He really wants people to be engulfed into the setting. That's not what this movie is. But at the end of the day, this one, we don't have characters that we care about. So Gene is 100% right. Is this on a sub level is just a formalic cop movie that looks good. That's all it is. And we can't defer from the substance or the repetitiveness that this is any other cop movie of the 80s. And this just is a little bit one octave above the other when it comes to visual style.
Agreed. Okay, let's hear what Roger has to say about it.
I was also very disappointed in this movie. One of the things I kept thinking of as I looked at it was Blade Runner, the earlier movie by Ridley Scott, which used enormous dramatically effective settings in urban Los Angeles of the future, making that into a very depressing, kind of overwhelming city, kind of the Gotham City of Los Angeles, if you will. They're doing the same thing here, but to no purpose. And what happens is the city, Osaka, the sets for the city, overwhelm the action. There is so much visually going on that has nothing to do with the story that you're almost distracted. And then in the middle of it, this really dumb, simple story. I mean, it's not a very good plot. And I didn't mention Kate Capshaw, who was the bartender in the mob hangout.
Because she's an important...
Now, this could have been a cliche of one sort, where they have the geisha who falls in love with the American cop and gives him all the secrets. Instead, it's an American girl who's been there 8 years and presumably knows every single secret of the Japanese mafia, which she doles out to Michael Douglas one at a time. I somehow doubt if an American girl could find out everything about the Japanese Yakuza, as they call themselves, even in 8 years, even as a bartender.
Well, if she knew it all, why would she give it to him?
Yeah, that's a good point.
The whole thing is, this movie is made like an American film, and they just, I think it's almost insulting. Well, the portrayal of the Japanese in the film, which could have been exciting and fresh to us, is just standard stuff updated from stereotypes of the 40s.
Terrifically good-looking productions to cover up a very, 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 very thin script.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't say it better myself. They are both correct here. I do think that there is definitely some kind of studio meddling, or let's call it screenwriting 101, right? You can't just have all these macho guys throughout the whole movie without throwing some femininity in there. But why does it have to be the whitest girl you know? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. If anything, let's say you have a very intelligent, fluent in multiple languages, Japanese lady Yakuza. That would have been cool. I mean, there's no romantic element in this movie whatsoever. You think that they would try and shove a sex scene in there. They don't, which is fine. I think that there could have been a lot more connection to culture had it been a lady Yakuza who's maybe wanting to be the boss or something. Again, I'm trying to fix the movie for it. I don't have to do that. But again, there is something to be said about just forced whiteness in this movie that doesn't have to be there. And if you recognize one instance of it, you start recognizing more of it. And I think that's the biggest crime, is that Kate Capshaw character actually is a deterrent to good character development, because it does nothing for the story other than say, oh, a white girl helps him in this country.
Well, Roger brings up, and you did as well, a great point of why do we have to have this forced American girl in this culture, in this world? And it doesn't make sense, because you know what? It would have been just as effective, if not more, to really stick to the culture, stick to the community, stick to the country, and really have Michael Douglas really fall in love with the people. I mean, if Hollywood studios really did have an issue with making this a white prominent film, we look at the history of it, of Karate Kid, where we have the glory of love, of the love story to that.
He falls in love with the culture. Last Samurai, he falls in love with the culture. Yeah.
It adds to the stakes. It adds to the story of, even if they don't focus on it, what are we going to see on the outcome between these two? Does it have to be a love story? No, it doesn't. It can still be the Macho Man Cobra-esque kind of action movie, whatever. But we still have that lingering in our minds of what's going to happen to these two. But this movie spoon feeds us every single step of this relationship. And again, it ends with nothingness. It makes no sense. It cripples it even more.
You know, I think it's funny, too, that the other big contradiction in this movie is that Michael Douglas's biggest complaint about the Japanese law enforcement structure is that it's so prone to influence and corruption by the mob. Yet the whole juxtaposition is this is a crooked cop. He took money, right? He's a dirty cop. He admits it. And yeah, he does have guilt for it. And yeah, he tries to like make amends for it. But the whole idea that he thinks that the American New York Police Department is better than what this is totally false, because he's the flawed character, yet they don't really let that contradiction in itself play out. They kind of just walk over it to make him look less weak. You need this character to be vulnerable. I mean, he's already losing everything. He gets the shit kicked out of him. He almost gets killed multiple times. that should break him more and more, but instead it like strengthens his resolve. And so the idea is like, oh, American macho and fortitude and all that bullshit. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And it just makes that character that much more unlikable. I think that was my biggest problem with this movie more than anything, is that I just hated that character. I just hated Nick Conlon. There was nothing I liked about him at all. Cut to a few years later, he makes Falling Down, where you're supposed to hate that character. And then you hate yourself for recognizing in that character some of the darker things that we all feel inside when we're stuck in traffic or we're arguing about the price of something. Like, that is a good written script because it reflects the character's flaws into our flaws. But this is just a bad character.
You know, the most successful cop movies are cops that we can relate to on a personal trait, where when they take off the badge, we see them as humans. We can kind of just say, I can get where his mindset is. I can see his vulnerabilities. I can see the occupation balance between it. Here, we don't get that. He is, again, macho, macho, macho. Wherever he is, he's going to be the same character. And that's where we really do despise this character on an entertainment level, on a personal level, and on a character development level. There is nothing here to attach us to this character to justify following him for over 2 hours. Ridley really, again, we talked about it, has a niche for bringing out characters, but again, he knows his character is shit, and that's why we have all these visuals.
He's overcompensating.
Yeah. We don't really have anything to attach it, and it's one of the worst Douglas performances because he doesn't even try to elevate this character. He just wants to be the tough cop, and that's it. It makes it so fucking dull.
Dude, if this was Kurt Russell bringing his Tango and Cash energy or his Pork Chop Express energy to it, at least that would have made it a little bit more entertaining, because I feel this character needs to act like a heel. When he's getting like humiliated and shut down by the Japanese police force, he should have like a moment of embarrassment and flawed and hubris. But instead, Michael Douglas just has like this stoic face all the way through. At least in Cobra, Stallone plays that stoicism to a manic T, right? With the toothpick, the match in his mouth, the glasses that never come off. It's a caricature. And Michael Douglas is portraying a caricature as if it's a real living person, and it's nonsense. It doesn't work. There needed to be humility in that character. And the way that Andy Garcia's character plays it, he could have played the same way. It's like, like, you're fucking up, dude. Like, how about you listen to these guys instead of be like anti-Asian, like, oh, I'm so much better, you guys, because I'm a New York Police Department. No, we fucked up big time. We gave the gangster to other gangsters, right? Like, that's a problem. That just doesn't play that way.
If you can take Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator 2, a robot, a cyborg, whatever, and shed a tear for that by just mere dialogue, singular lines, vulnerability, then how can you not have some empathy for Michael Douglas on just inserting moments? Just put his hands over his face, have him sigh, have him just take a deep breath when Andy Garcia dies. Give us a moment, even if they put 5 minutes or less, to have him be an up-close shot with Michael Douglas grieving Andy Garcia on a emotional level. That would have fixed it a slight. But we don't get any of those smart direction here, and it's so stupid. And for a Ridley Scott movie, you would think he would have the intelligence to say, you know what? I'm going to insert 2 minutes of just taking a breath to focus on the character.
I'm with you 100%. And as for Gene's review, you know what? I love the fact that he and I come into agreement, but here's the thing. There is no hyperbole in his critique. Everything he said is valid. Sometimes he emphasizes how bad a movie is or how bad a character is for the sake of entertainment, for the sake of validating his own point that he didn't like the movie. But he told no lies in this critique at all. I feel like it was very on the point, and he took the time to compliment how good the movie looks, because it does look good. And he does give Ridley Scott the respect of being an amazing filmmaker and visual artist, but he can explain why the movie doesn't work, and he's not wrong. I give him an A.
Yeah, I think Gene was completely on point with his review on this one. When it comes to Roger, I think he said all the right things. He complimented Gene. I think that's the key thing, is complimented all of Gene's key points and asked some questions that viewers should be asking themselves while watching this movie. But again, I think Gene stole a lot of thunder from Roger here, which is okay because I agree with him. This one is hard because I think Roger complimented what Gene said. So I can't give him a perfect review, but I'm going to give him 3 stars on it because I think these two were in unison on how they felt with it. So I think it's an okay review. I would have loved to see Roger lead this review to see if he said the same exact things as Gene, but I think they're both in agreement here. But Gene, I think, is going to get the star on this one.
Yeah, and they both do what I did. They overanalyze it. I mean, they do spend like a good minute of this conversation talking about the jurisdiction of what he can do and then why Kate Capshaw knows everything and why he should trust her. Like, that's meaningless. It's just there to break up the monotony of what this movie is. It's screenwriting 101, but let's say if this was 120 pages, they should have trimmed 10 off of it, and maybe we'll talk. But yeah, the cliche of this movie is the fact that like everything that it does wrong because it's going by what supposedly is the right way to tell a story or write a script. And it's overcompensated with visualizations. So yeah, they're not wrong, but they did exactly what we did, overanalyzed.
An action movie that looks great, but isn't an action movie. Got it.
Yeah, got it. The last 10 minutes, roughly. Okay, so next week, we are going back to sci-fi land with the better of the sci-fi monster alien movies. We're bringing Predator, starring Arnold and Carl Weathers. And man, like, this is going to be a fun conversation. I've never heard or read what the critique of Predator was from either of these guys, so I can't wait to dig into that, because I think we all know the legacy of this movie and, you know, what it spawned and how it's been kind of molded into other things, and it gets rebooted all the time and stuff like that. You know, we've discussed Prey on the show and Predator Badlands on other shows, so let's go back to the beginning, talking Predator.
Can't wait for this. The conversation between Siskel and Ebert didn't age well.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to walk in totally blind to this one, so that's exciting. So anyway, please tune in for that. Thank you for watching, listening, rate, review, subscribe to us on Apple and Spotify. Please follow our YouTube channel, like, rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. You can find me, Antonio, the host of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast, at thecultworthy.com. Find my co-host Justin Henson over at
The Movie Wire Podcast at themoviewire.com.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.